Okay, back from Summer Game Fest, the dust has settled. I have a lot of games to talk about that I actually got my hands on, some things I got to play early, games that are releasing this year and beyond that I guess I can give you guys some impressions on. Now, don't take this as gospel. I always say previewing games is hard. I like to judge the finished product, but if you just want to know some information and some feel, I got you covered with a couple of games I got to check out. This is all behind the scenes stuff at Summer Game Fest and beyond, really. Some bigger games and some smaller games. So let's just start off with Sonic Shadow Generations. So I loved Sonic Generations. I thought it was a really cool spin on things. I like the hybrid of the two Sonics. But again, and I talked about this with the last Sonic game, I am a casual Sonic fan, a casual Sonic enjoyer, but I always thought Shadow was cool. So essentially, I really like the idea of what they're doing here. They're kind of remastering, upgrading Sonic Generations and adding in Shadow content. How it seems to work here, at least from what I got to see, is that it's almost like a Bowser's Fury type of thing where you access the Shadow content through a separate menu. It's its own kind of separate thing in the game or the disc or whatever you want to call it. And I essentially got to blaze through a couple of handful 3D levels as Shadow, and it was pretty much exactly what I was expecting. It plays similar to the 3D Sonic, the fast-paced, running forward style maps, but Shadow's just a little punchier. His animations are different, but for me, what really stood out was the levels themselves, the visual style, this kind of like almost trippy cyberspace digital thing you probably saw in the announcement trailer. There's a lot of that going on here, and I just found that really cool. These levels, and famously in Sonic, you can run through them really quickly. These levels felt bigger to me. I feel like I spent a longer time going through a couple of them, and they also just felt bigger perspective-wise. There's a lot more going on. The transitions to different parts of the map or just, camera directions and stuff felt a lot more over the top, a lot more stylish, and a lot more grandiose in spectacle. So like a lot of Shadow wish fulfillment stuff is there, I think, except for the fact that he doesn't have a gun or anything cool like that. He doesn't have the edginess. I don't know what's going on there, but I also got to do a level where I fought a big boss, essentially a boss in a circular arena where I could run around that boss super fast and do my thing. And this is where you're getting more of like the super powered over the top stuff, almost like the Dragon Ball style shit where like you are Shadow just absolutely kicking this thing's ass with hyper fast punches, uppercuts right up into the air, slamming back down. A little clunky at first. It takes a little bit of time to get used to, kind of, instead of just running fast, now you're just running around a boss and focusing on dodging its attacks. It was a little bit jarring. It took a little bit to get used to, but ultimately I ended up mastering it and having a lot of fun with it. Along with that, I also just got to revisit a couple of early levels of Sonic Generations in new restored glory, and it has been a while since I've played Sonic Generations. I played it at launch, but just with my casual eyes here, I found it to look absolutely gorgeous. Super sharp, blazing fast, just very detailed, incredibly colorful. So it seems like it's getting the proper treatment, the proper care here. Again, it is early. Gotta judge the final game when it releases. I only got to see a little bit, but yeah. Another big one I am excited to say I got to play is Stalker 2. Stalker 2 exists. That was the thing for me, is that like I'm happy I got my hands on it. I got to see that this is finally a game. After years and years of development, years and years of delays, especially because of like the war in Ukraine and stuff like that with the developers, it is really nice to see this thing finally exist and me being able to play it with my own two hands. Stalker is a hard game to demo, essentially, to just play a preview of it for like 30 minutes or so. But essentially, I got to see something that's fairly early on in the game. I got to see like an introductory cutscene and jumping out into the zone, venturing through a little bit of a wasteland in the woods and exploring some abandoned factories and stuff like that, and doing a little bit of the scientific stuff of Stalker, dealing with anomalies. It was painfully simple, though, what I did get to do. I just wanted to see more. I got to see inventory and stuff like that. The inventory management is pretty much what I was expecting. But from a gameplay perspective, I didn't really, frankly, do too much in this. I got to explore, kind of get caught up in the atmosphere. I did get into a really good shootout with a couple of enemies that I really liked. Essentially, you creep up over a wall and you're looking out over a field and night is setting in and you see enemies essentially searching for you in the grass with flashlights. From that point, you're free to engage however you want. I pretty much just started blasting and it felt good. It felt realistic. The enemies seemed fairly smart and it was challenging and simple and not video gamed up. There's not a lot of intense feedback or flashing or HUD or anything like that. It's just you see a guy in the distance, he's kind of a dot. You fire a couple of bullets at him, you hope you hit him, you can't really tell, you gotta move forward a little bit and really try and find him and snuff out these enemies. I found it challenging, I found it cool, I found it engaging, I found it a little old school PC feeling, which was what I wanted. I also got to face off against, I think was a bloodsucker, the enemy type from the original game. Absolutely kicked my ass. Not a lot of ways to really go about it. I think in the demo, my character was kind of underprepared for the situation because they can turn invisible and basically almost one-shot you. I actually found it pretty frustrating, but it goes with the whole brutality of this game, survival in this irradiated wasteland. Then unfortunately at the end of the demo, when it started to really get good, the demo was over. I couldn't play anymore, but essentially it was like the lead up to a big shootout and a showdown, and that bummed me out. That being said, I did get to engage with some anomalies, plant some scientific equipment, see some weird stuff, and ultimately it was very Stalker. That being said, it also feels older. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this does not feel to me like a big, flashy AAA first-person shooter. It doesn't even feel like something like a Metro Exodus. It feels simpler, pared down, a little rough around the edges, but not necessarily in a bad way. But I think people who didn't play the original games, that might take them by surprise, but I'm glad this game still feels like it has some identity with the original game. Again, I only played a little bit of it, so I need to see more, but at least I can come to you guys and tell you that Stalker 2 exists, and I have played it. Switching over to sort of indie real quick, Blumhouse, the publishers behind a lot of horror movies, announced a whole publishing initiative for video games. It was one of my favorite highlights from Summer Game Fest. I talked about that in a previous video with how essentially they're funding smaller indie horror experiences from various levels, 2D, 3D, action, not. But one of the games that they are releasing first under their window is Fear the Spotlight, and I got to play a ton of that. Now, Fear the Spotlight did actually exist already. It was previously published, but it was taken down and now funded by Blumhouse, and so I've never played it before, so I got to experience it, and I really liked it. Lo-fi, PS1 inspired horror. Essentially, it's the horror trope of like the nerdy girl and the goth girl that sneak into the school library at night during a thunderstorm to play with a Ouija board, and weird shit happens. But there's PS1 style graphics here that really help elevate the mood from the sound and the visuals, but to like an effective degree. It's not just like a filter slapped over things. Like, it got the visual style right, the fuzz, the flickering of textures, and they also use that in a way that makes the game feel a little scarier. The draw distance being so small, you could barely see what's in front of you, and sometimes that's really unnerving and unsettling. It reminded me of something like the first Silent Hill. That being said, this seems a little lighter, a little more character-based. It's got a little bit more charm to it, but I did have moments where there was some tension. I did get creeped out a little bit. The game doesn't rely on jump scares. It seems to rely on just kind of building that weird fear. And I found it really, really cool. And I think if Blumhouse is going for stuff like this and then big, crazy horror first-person shooters and all these in-betweens, I think they're going to have a really good mix, because Fear the Spotlight is a good indicator of just good creativity. It might not be a game for everybody, but I really dug it. Also, from the Microsoft Xbox side of things, I got to play Age of Mythology Retold. This was really cool to see, because every time they do a, like an Age of Empires re-release or remaster or whatever, people are always begging for the weird one from the early 2000s, Age of Mythology, which lets you get a lot more crazy and you fight with fantastical armies and characters and settings. So here, they've essentially retained the game, but blown it out a little bit. Visually, I got to see the old game and the new game, like character models and stuff like that, side by side, and they're doing a really good job bringing it up to more modern visual fidelity, but still feeling kind of early 2000s and a little corny and colorful, and I think it's good that they got the feel right. But in terms of playing, what I got to experience was a lot of fun. What they have done is opened up the god powers, which was something that in the original game was very limited use, and you would kind of do it as like your last big thing. Here, they're tweaking things a little bit to get you to use those powers more and have a little bit more of that power fantasy. I think that makes sense. I am not like a purist hardcore person for the original game, so whatever at this point, but the fact that I was able to call upon the gods to do like big lightning blasts, AoE stuff pretty frequently in battles when things got tough, I found that pretty engaging. They're redoing the whole damn thing for people, so if you like Age of Empires, I'd say keep an eye on this, especially because like the team working on this just seems really excited about it, like they're just geeking out about it, which I like to see. Also, I got to play Phantom Blade Zero, the big PlayStation third-person action game. Is pretty awesome from what I got to see. It is not really a Souls-like. It is way more of a Ninja Gaiden Devil May Cry thing. It's definitely got some intense difficulty and some brutal timings and parry stuff, but it's way more about player expression and fun with combos and weird weapons. And I really like that. So the demo I got to experience was really good. It was like a tutorial area, then like an area where there's like enemy mobs and stuff and like you can kill them, and then a boss rush. I got to do 3 bosses back to back that just kind of highlighted different mechanics, different things within the game, to mess with. So I got to see a pretty good little glimpse of what's going on. I got no inkling of story, character, anything like that, just gameplay. And I think what they're cooking here is pretty good. I was very much one of those people when this game was first revealed. I was like, is that even a real game? Like with the animations and stuff like that. It just looked too good to be true. And a lot of those animations are here and very expressive and very smooth and realistic looking. But that's part of just chaining really long, endless combos. Now you can get stuck in those combo loops sometimes. And I did struggle with that, like when I could cancel out of intense combos and when I could not. It doesn't seem like it's always as refined and accurate as it could be. But what I really liked is that the game emphasizes you just going nuts and doing insane combos. One of the developers pitched it to me as like, when you play a Souls-like game or something, you get bosses that can do these endless combos at you, and it's so stylish and awesome and cool. In this game, you essentially get to do that. You get to do all these crazy flippy-do combos that are like endless on enemies, and it's really, really satisfying once I got the hang of it. There's heavy attacks, light attacks, you're chaining those together, you're also empowering those attacks by perfect timing, perfect parries, combos, dodges, and stuff like that. But you're also encouraged and incentivized to switch weapons. You have a stance cooldown like thing that you can actually speed up by switching weapons mid-combo. So the game kind of really encourages you to do that a lot. And that kind of reminded me of Devil May Cry, and I was actually very happy with that. And it's very cool, very seamless to switch weapons back and forth, bam, 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 and just fuck up enemies. Really, really satisfying, coupled with some really interesting ranged weapons. You get like a bow and arrow, you get stuff like that, and they're all about, you can use it or you can hold the button down and it'll charge like 1, 2, 3, and then that'll be like the hardest one, and you can let go and unleash a really powerful attack. But I also got to engage like a giant cannon thing and a dragon head that would come out and just like spray fire. Really almost like cartoony, over the top. These weapons would just like come out of nowhere, like out of thin air, but you just really feel like a badass. The game felt fairly generous to me with like timing of parries and dodges and stuff like that, but to get those perfect hits, those perfect parries, and keep going and keep comboing and just absolutely overwhelm an enemy, I really, really enjoyed. The jury's still out on like how all of this will flow together later on in the game. It was early in the game where I played, and also like what's even going on with this adventure, this story. How linear is it really? I don't know for sure, but what I did get to see, what I did get to play, I really left just wanting to see more. That was everything I wanted to run through, or at least everything I have time for. There are 2 other things I did get to see at Summer Game Fest from Ubisoft that I'll talk about in a separate video because I have a little bit more to say, so I want to kind of like, blow that out a little bit more. But for here, everything I talked about, I definitely want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you think about Phantom Blade Zero, Age of Mythology, Stalker 2. Let's talk about this stuff down in the comments. And thank you guys for hearing me out on this. I just like talking about stuff I love, some games I've seen and stuff like that. So if you like that, clicking the like button helps me. Thank you. But I'll see you in the next video. Keep your eyes peeled for that in a couple of days. A couple more games I got my hands on that I do want to blow out. So this is essentially part 1 of 2, really. Either way, though, thanks for sticking with me. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.